The Elon Musk vs. Sam Altman saga continues, and now we have a brand new deposition that just dropped featuring Ilya Sutskever, former founder of OpenAI, one of the leading minds in artificial intelligence. And there are so many interesting bits from this 62-page document, which I read in full. I highlighted the most interesting bits, and I'm gonna break it all down for you. The cast of characters include, of course, Sam Altman, Ilya Sutskever, Mira Murati, former CTO. We have Greg Brockman, the former OpenAI board plotting against Sam Altman, and Dario Amodei, current founder of Anthropic, former employee of OpenAI. There's so much going on. I'm gonna read through it. Let's get into it. And this video is brought to you by Recraft. More on them later. Now, remember, the context for this deposition is Elon Musk suing Sam Altman. And that's because Elon Musk thinks it is illegal the way that Sam Altman took a nonprofit, took all of these donations, built one of the most important companies of all time, and has effectively converted it into a for-profit company. As of last week, we now know that the nonprofit controls the Public Benefit Corporation, which still is a for-profit company, but it is more mission-driven than just shareholder value. So let me paint the picture. This is a deposition between one set of lawyers and Ilya Sutskever and his lawyers. This deposition occurred on October 1st, 2025, just about a month ago. And oh boy, it is wild. So a few things to note. First, this was recorded at the Cooley LLP offices. Cooley is one of the most prominent law firms in Silicon Valley. And the plaintiff, Elon Musk, versus the defendant, Samuel Altman et al. And there are also appearances from Microsoft, which is fascinating, although it's barely mentioned. So again, this is Elon Musk versus Sam Altman, but it's almost entirely about Ilya Sutskever, Sam Altman's firing, the board dynamics prior to that firing, and the subsequent fallout. So the first thing we learned is that Ilya Sutskever put together a 52-page memo in preparation of attempting to get Sam Altman fired from OpenAI. There was a long history of dissatisfaction from Ilya towards Sam Altman about how Sam Altman was running the company specifically. And this became public information at the time of the firing just about 2 years ago, that Sam Altman exhibits a consistent pattern of lying, undermining his execs and pitting his execs against one another. And now, back to the 52-page memo. I'm gonna tell you what was actually in the memo and how it came to be, but more on that in a minute. And the first line of questioning between lawyers and Ilya Sutskever, that is not Ilya's lawyers, those were the opposing lawyers, was about the 52-page document and who he sent it to and why he didn't send it to Sam Altman. I think it's obvious why, but listen to his words. Why didn't you send it to the entire board? It being the document, the board being the entire board of directors for OpenAI. Because we were having the discussions with the independent directors only. Independent meaning not aligned with Sam Altman, I believe. And why didn't you send it to Sam Altman? Because I felt that had he become aware of these discussions, he would just find a way to make them disappear. So at this point, right around the time of the firing, Ilya Sutskever already had a pretty bad relationship with Sam Altman. He was already kind of secretly putting together this document in hopes that he would be able to convince the board to fire Sam Altman, which he actually was able to do. Now, obviously, you remember about a week later, Sam Altman came back, but the initial firing did happen. And he also thought that if Sam Altman found out about the discussions, he would actually just make them disappear. And more on that later, because Ilya Sutskever really believes that Sam Altman and other CEOs are killers. They are very political, they are cutthroat, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to seek and control power. Now, interestingly, the board actually asked Ilya to prepare the document. So it's kind of weird. It's a little confusing how that went down, but listen to this. The context for this document is that the independent board members asked me to prepare it, and I did. And I was pretty careful. Most of the screenshots that I have, most or all, I don't remember, I get them from Mira Murati. And so it seems Mira Murati was also very much aligned with Ilya in that Sam Altman had to go. She was capturing screenshots of chat interactions, text, Slack, whatever it is, as evidence, as a breadcrumb trail to showing that Sam Altman is a poor leader. Now, I'm not giving my opinion on any of this. I'm just trying to convey what was actually going on and provide a little bit of context. It made sense to include them being the screenshots, in order to paint a picture from a large number of small pieces of evidence or items. And so they're putting together evidence that he's a bad leader, but what does that actually mean? Are you still wasting time jumping between your AI chats and design canvas? Recraft's new chat mode ends that for good. So imagine this, you generate a logo, drag it into the chat and say, create a full brand kit from this. Social posts, posters, mockups, all in minutes. And at the end, you have a consistent set of full brand assets that you can use immediately. This is the magic of Recraft's new chat mode. It's a powerful AI chat assistant with an infinite canvas. Start in chat for lightning fast exploration and then switch to canvas for pixel perfect control. No more switching between apps. The entire creative process from first prompt to final assets happens now in one place. So stop just generating images, start creating with precision. Join the beta chat mode waitlist today. Link in the description. Let them know I sent you. Recraft has been a phenomenal partner. Now back to the video. Now, which independent directors asked you to prepare your memo Exhibit 19? It was most likely Adam D'Angelo. Who is Adam D'Angelo? So first, a little bit of background. He was educated at Phillips Exeter Academy, the same academy that Mark Zuckerberg went to. He joined Facebook shortly after its launch, served as its chief technology officer from 2006 to 2008, and as vice president of engineering until 2008. Then in 2009, he co-founded Quora, which is a Q&A website very popular in Silicon Valley, and he has been serving as CEO ever since. And he has served on the board of OpenAI since 2018. And kind of surprisingly, Adam D'Angelo is still on the board of OpenAI. Even after most of the board that went against Sam Altman was fired, he's still there. And so Ilya continues and says, I had discussions with the independent board members discussing Sam Altman. And after having these discussions, either Adam or the three of them together, I don't remember, have asked me to collect supporting screenshots. And the three of them together, Adam D'Angelo, Helen Toner, and Tasha McCauley. And I already explained who Adam D'Angelo is, but let's go over the other two. Now, this is Helen Toner. She is an Australian-born AI researcher. And she, especially at the time of the Sam Altman firing, was quite vocal about it. She was a main player in his firing. She actually ended up writing kind of a negative piece about OpenAI while still being on the board at OpenAI. Then we have Tasha McCauley, another OpenAI board member at the time, a tech entrepreneur and robot/AI specialist. And kind of interesting tidbit, she's married to Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Now, back to the point, why are people aligning against Sam Altman? Why did they think he was a bad leader? Well, according to this document, according to other documents that have come out since the firing, here is the crux of the issue. Sam exhibits a consistent pattern of lying, undermining his execs, and pitting his execs against one another. And the lawyer says that was clearly your view at the time. And Ilya says, correct. So he continues to ask, and did you want them to take action over what you wrote? What you wrote being that memo. And I wanted them to become aware of it, but my opinion was that action was appropriate. And what action did you think was appropriate? Termination. Ilya thought Sam needed to be out. And Ilya was very worried about that memo getting out and leaking. And the lawyer continues, and you sent it using a form of disappearing email. Is that right? Yes. Why? Because I was worried that those memos will somehow leak. But it wasn't all against Sam Altman. He also had similar thoughts of Greg Brockman. So lawyer, you drafted a similar memo that was acritical of Greg Brockman, correct? Yes. Then they transitioned to talking about Ilya's equity in OpenAI. So were you concerned about losing your equity in OpenAI at the time? Ilya says, I was not concerned, as he probably shouldn't have been because that is pretty ironclad equity that he has. Then he asks, how much was your equity worth? So what was your equity at OpenAI worth at the time? What did you think it was worth? Then the lawyers go back and forth as to why that's relevant for this deposition. Ultimately, he doesn't end up answering the question directly. Then the questioning goes towards why the board eventually, after the firing, decided to resign and reinstate Sam Altman. And just the quick history lesson, they fired him, and just about a week later, he was back and the board had resigned and he was basically in control, he being Sam Altman. So right now, my view is that with very few exceptions, most likely a person who is going to be in charge is going to be very good with the way of power. And it will be a lot like choosing between different politicians. What does Ilya actually mean? Well, he means Sam Altman has sharp elbows and is willing to use them. He is saying Sam Altman is extremely good at the political nature of power seeking. And he continues, the person in charge of what? AGI. Ilya continues, that's how the world seems to work. I think it's not impossible, but I think it's very hard for someone who would be described as a saint to make it. Basically, if you're a good guy, you're not really going to be in these powerful positions at these companies. I think it's worth trying. I just think it's like choosing between different politicians. Who is going to be the head of the state? Then they continue and talk about the removal of Sam Altman and the process therein. So from the lawyer, and in reviewing the steps that preceded the removal, do you think that process was correct? Ilya says, one thing I could say is that the process was rushed. Obviously, they fumbled firing Sam Altman. He came back and was more powerful than ever. But why? Well, the process was rushed. Why was it rushed? Well, I think it was rushed because the board was inexperienced. And he continues, and the lawyer says, inexperienced in what? In board matters. Then they get into this line of questioning around how familiar Tasha and Helen, the two board members who wanted to fire Sam Altman, were with OpenAI's day-to-day operations. And it's wild because if you remember, Helen said she found out about ChatGPT initially from Twitter. She didn't even know about it. Watch this clip.
When ChatGPT came out, November 2022, the board was not informed in advance about that. We learned about ChatGPT on Twitter.
And here's a clip of Helen Toner explaining why she wanted Sam Altman out of OpenAI.
Sam didn't inform the board that he owned the OpenAI startup fund, even though he, constantly was claiming to be an independent board member with no financial interest in the company. On multiple occasions, he gave us inaccurate information about the small number of formal safety processes that the company did have in place, meaning that it was, basically impossible for the board to know how well those safety processes were working or what might need to change. And then, a last example that I can share, because it's been very widely reported, relates to this paper that I wrote, which has been, I think, way overplayed in the press. The problem was that after the paper came out, Sam started lying to other board members in order to try and push me off the board. So it was another example that just really damaged our ability to trust him. And
so back to the deposition. How familiar did Tasha and Helen appear to you to be with OpenAI's operations? Ilya, they seem to have some familiarity, but it's hard for me to assess. Did you view them as experts in AI safety? Then his counsel objects. They go back and forth as to why this is all relevant to the Musk versus Sam Altman lawsuit. Remember, this is what it's all about. Then do you recall in October 2023, Helen Toner publishing an article criticizing OpenAI? He says, I do recall. What do you recall about that? I don't recall the nature of the criticism, but I recall it was praising Anthropic. I found it a strange thing for her to do. Did you think it was appropriate for her to do as a board member of OpenAI? I thought it was not far from obviously inappropriate. So he's saying, yes, it was inappropriate. Then after the firing, after Helen Toner was removed from the board, here is the line of questioning. Did you support removing Helen Toner from the board or asking her to leave? Ilya, at least at one point, I expressed support. Remember, Ilya stayed on after this whole fiasco happened for a while, actually. And he supported, at least for a time being, getting rid of Helen Toner. Now, here is something crazy. Helen Toner believed that if Sam Altman leaving OpenAI caused OpenAI to get destroyed that would still be in line with OpenAI's mission. So she was willing to kill the company and still believed it was the right thing to do. So after Sam was removed, do you recall Helen Toner telling employees that allowing the company to be destroyed would be consistent with the mission? Ilya, I do recall. What was the context of that comment? The executives. It was a meeting with the board members and the executive team. The executives told the board that if Sam does not return, then OpenAI will be destroyed, and that's inconsistent with OpenAI's mission. And Helen Toner said something to the effect of that it is consistent, but I think she said it even more directly than that. She was willing to let OpenAI be destroyed. Now, the lawyer asks Ilya, what do you think? Do you think that was consistent? He says, I could imagine hypothetical extreme circumstances. That answer would be yes. But at that point in time, the answer was definitely no from me. Now, they start asking about Sam's time at Y Combinator. If you're not familiar, Y Combinator is the premier accelerator in Silicon Valley. They invest in thousands of startups, many of which you have heard of: Airbnb, Stripe, Coinbase, and many more. And Sam Altman went through the accelerator with his own company and then eventually became president of YC. So the lawyer asks, and you say here, there's reason to believe that Sam was removed from YC in the past for a reason similar to the one that you identify in this document. And here the lawyer's reading a document to Ilya. Sam was pushed out from YC for similar behaviors. He was creating chaos, starting lots of new projects, pitting people against each other, and thus was not managing YC well. And Paul Graham did actually refute this claim. So May 30th, 2024, I got tired of hearing that YC fired Sam. So here's what actually happened. People have been claiming YC fired Sam Altman. That's not true. Here's what actually happened. For several years, he was running both YC and OpenAI. But when OpenAI announced that it was going to have a for-profit subsidiary and that Sam was going to be the CEO, we, specifically Jessica, one of the founders of YC, Paul Graham's wife, told him that if he was going to work full-time on OpenAI, we should find someone else to run YC, and he agreed. If he'd said that he was going to find someone else to be CEO of OpenAI so that he could focus 100% on YC, we'd been fine with that too. We didn't want him to leave, just choose one or the other. And that's understandable and seemingly continues to be the dynamic between Paul Graham, YC, and Sam Altman. They all seem to have a very good relationship. They all seem to praise Sam Altman's executive ability. And Mira Murati was the person who told Ilya this. So this information came only from Mira. Ilya, yes. Did you seek to verify the information with Brad? That is Brad Lightcap, currently Chief Operating Officer of OpenAI. And Ilya says, no, he did not verify that information. And it continues. The lawyer is reading a document again. Interestingly, it is my understanding that Greg was essentially fired from Stripe as well. Ilya says, yes. What was the basis for that allegation? Again, Mira told me. Did you seek to verify it with Greg? No, why not? It didn't occur to me. I thought that I fully believed the information that Mira was giving me. Then here is a section entitled Pitting People Against Each Other. So the lawyer says, turning to the next page, you see an example that's offered is Daniela, which is Daniela Amade, Dario Amade's sister, also both founders and leaders of Anthropic. Daniela versus Mira. Who told you that Sam pitted Daniela against Mira? Answer again, Mira. Mira really was telling Ilya all of these things. Now, keep in mind, this may have been what Mira was perceiving happening. Whether it is true or not, that is up for discussion. Now, at a certain point, it becomes clear that Dario wanted to be the head of research at OpenAI, and that is a replacement for Greg Brockman. And Sam Altman was not making a firm decision, either saying, yes, Dario, you can lead, or no, Greg Brockman is the leader, you report to him. So as read, Sam was not taking a firm position in respect of Dario wanting to run all of research at OpenAI and to have Greg fired. And so not only did Dario want to run all of research, but he also wanted Greg Brockman out. And Ilya says the real problem was that, well, let me just read it. My recollection of what I wrote here is that I was faulting Sam for not accepting or rejecting Dario's conditions. Dario said, I want to take over and here's what I need to make that happen. And Sam didn't just say okay or no. He simply just let it sit there. And of course, lack of decision making is oftentimes worse than the actual decision being made. So they go on to ask, was Dario's conditions fair to take over? And Ilya says, I don't have precise enough knowledge of Dario's conditions, but my overall sense is that they were not fair and that Sam should have rejected them outright. And then they start to talk about Jakub Pachaki. As read, so this is the lawyer reading a document, involves Sam lying, undermining Mira, undermining Ilya, and pitting Jakub against Ilya. Joint work with Greg and Jakub. What was the lying in the episode by Sam in the episode involving Jakub? Ilya replies, Sam was telling me and Jakub conflicting things about the way the company would be run. And just keep in mind, Jakub Pachaki is currently chief scientist at OpenAI alongside Mark Chen, who is the chief research officer. And the lawyer continues to ask questions to Ilya, asking him follow-up questions. And I think this is really funny. Ilya's lawyer says, we're now bordering on harassing the witness, and I am going to shut it down. All right, then we get to a really interesting bit. It turns out, and I didn't know about this, I don't think this was public until now, Anthropic, during all of this conflict, actually tried to either acquire or merge with OpenAI. Remember, Dario had already left. He started Anthropic with his sister. And now, during the time Sam Altman was fired, he tried to merge with OpenAI. So, lawyer, do you know whether a proposal was made around the time for OpenAI to merge with Anthropic? He answers, I do know about that. The lawyer says, tell me. I don't know whether it was Helen who reached out to Anthropic or whether Anthropic reached out to Helen Toner from OpenAI's board, but they reached out with a proposal to be merged with OpenAI and take over its leadership. And what ended up happening with that proposal? I recall Anthropic expressing their excitement about it and expressing the issue, the practical challenges that they would have with it. And what was your response? Asking Ilya. I was very unhappy about it. Why? Because I really did not want OpenAI to merge with Anthropic. Why not? I just didn't want to. And then what about the other board members? Were they supportive? They were a lot more supportive, yes. Were all of them supportive? I think at the very least, none were unsupportive. And then he asks who was the most supportive, and he says, Helen Toner. Then he starts asking about an article that came out and who was actually talking to the reporter. So as read, from the article, Sutskever had been waiting for a moment when the board dynamics would allow for Altman to be replaced as the CEO. And so he asked, what were the dynamics you were waiting for? And Ilya says that the majority of the board is not obviously friendly with Sam. Then he says, when did that happen? When there was a sequence of rapid departures from the board for different reasons. I don't remember what they were. I don't remember who exactly left, but that's what it's referring to. Question, so for how long have you been planning to propose removal of Sam? This is where it gets wild. For some time. I mean, planning is the wrong word because it didn't seem feasible. He didn't even think it was possible. He wanted to for a long time, and I'm going to tell you how long, but he didn't even think it was possible. He says it didn't seem feasible. It was not feasible prior, so I was not planning. How long had you been considering it? At least a year. So he was unhappy for a long time. And after the firing, Ilya was surprised by the reaction of OpenAI's employees. I don't think he really understood the cultural significance that Sam Altman had and the morale influence Sam Altman had on OpenAI's team members. So as read from an article, Sutskever was astounded. He had expected the employees of OpenAI to cheer. That's cheer at Sam Altman's firing. Is that true? He asked Ilya. I had not expected them to cheer, but I have not expected them to feel strongly either way. But they did. Remember, there was a whole campaign where so many of OpenAI's employees were posting on Twitter, OpenAI is nothing without its team, or something along those lines. All right, next, the witness, Ilya, gets passed to Microsoft's lawyers now. Is it your belief that Sam Altman will have a financial interest in OpenAI someday? And remember, we just found out Sam Altman continues to have 0 shares in OpenAI. So when he was in front of Senate and said, I have no financial interest in making OpenAI successful. I'm already a billionaire. I don't need more money. He said, hey, that was a little tone deaf, but yeah, it was true and continues to be true. I have no stake in these companies. Ilya says, I recall reading about it in the news, but I don't know how accurate it is, meaning Sam Altman having eventually a stake in OpenAI. And then Ilya Sutskever ended up leaving OpenAI and starting his own company, his own frontier lab, Safe Superintelligence. So the lawyer asked, why did you leave? Ultimately, I had a big new vision and I felt it more suitable for a new company. At the time immediately prior to your departure of OpenAI, did you have an equity stake in the company? Yes, obviously. What do you believe the value of that equity stake was at the time you left? And then they go back and forth again saying Ilya should not have to say what the value of that stake is worth and it's irrelevant to everything else we're talking about. And of course, a little bit more bickering. We've heard a lot of you today, so let me finish. I love that. Then they go back. Do you still have a financial interest in OpenAI? Yes. Has the amount of the interest increased or decreased since you've left OpenAI? Increased. Of course, it's gone up in value. So apparently, since he left OpenAI, he's actually gotten more shares. And then they continue, and the shares that he did get and the increasing amount of shares have also increased in value. Has the value of your interest in OpenAI increased or decreased since you left OpenAI? Increased. Okay, now this next section is just kind of hilarious. It's bickering between the two sets of lawyers. And rather than me just reading it, I'm going to role play it with Alex. Be courteous and respectful.
You be courteous and respectful.
The court reporter says, the court reporter is noting for the record that it cannot be taken due to simultaneous crosstalk. Once counsel can continue with decorum in a professional manner, the record will resume. Let's take 5.
Yeah, don't raise your voice.
I'm tired of being told that I'm talking too much.
Well, you are.
Check yourself. All right, now back to the line of questioning. The lawyers ask Ilya, what is Safe Superintelligence? What is the purpose of that company? To do a new and different kind of research. And what does that mean exactly? I have a new idea of how to do things and I want to try to do them. Then they go on to discussing who's paying Ilya's legal fees for this court case. And it's interesting. Who is paying your legal fees for this? Objection. Then they ask again, who is paying your legal fees? I'm not sure. Ilya says he's not even sure who's paying for them. And have a guess, but I'm not 100% sure. How did you come to retain counsel? And then the lawyer says, I'm not going to allow him to answer that question. Once again, is OpenAI paying your legal fees? I think that's probably the case. So that's it. I found this absolutely fascinating. I loved the back and forth between the lawyers. I love the new information we found about this. It is seemingly inevitable that we're going to have a movie about what went down with OpenAI. And once again, thank you to Recraft. They've been a phenomenal partner. Check them out. I'll drop the links down below. Click through, let them know I sent you because they have a fantastic product. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.